My brothers and sisters in Christ, today in the first reading you hear one of the most striking images of all of the Old Testament prophecies, this image of the waters flowing forth from the temple as Ezekiel sees them in his vision. It's an image that church fathers grabbed onto very powerfully and in fact links to a lot of the powerful passages we hear from the Gospel of John during this Lenten season. A couple of Sundays ago, we heard the passage of the woman at the well in Samaria, Jesus referring to giving the living water, not just continuing to fill buckets from a cistern of water that will never truly quench thirst, but instead the living water that he will give. And then he goes on to speak of himself as the living water, as the Gospel of John continues. And so we hear the image of living water that, as we know, won't be fulfilled completely until Good Friday itself. When Jesus expires on the cross, the lance opens up his side and blood and water pour forth. Yes, this is an allusion to Eucharist and baptism, but truly it's the lifeblood of God flowing forth for his people, God spent for his people. And so this image that we hear in Ezekiel today is one of renewal that comes from restored temple worship. And in that sense, it may seem remote to us in our immediate applicability. But if we understand that the Old Testament temple worship is fulfilled in the person of Christ in the eternal liturgy, then that can change our focus, which is just as God was present, understood to his people to be physically present in the temple, the place where sacrifice and worship was offered. For us, it is no longer about the one temple. Yes, we have our churches, we have our dedicated altars, but the church is something much deeper. The church is the bride of Christ united to him. Literally, the rib come forth from his pierced side, giving life to his bride. But in the liturgy, Christ the center, who is both priest and sacrifice, and in fact the altar himself, the living water that pours forth for us, first in our baptism, the way we're incorporated into life of God. But in our entering into worship, we are united with Christ, who makes a complete offering of himself to his Father and for us. This is all liturgical and sacramental theology that I'm speaking. Perhaps it's a powerful message for you, perhaps not, perhaps it seems opaque. But what I want to say further is that during this season of Lent, we try to go further through our prayer, our fasting, our almsgiving these ways. We try to go deeper with Christ. But all too often, we settle for little. Our expectations aren't big enough. Perhaps our expectations are high for the things that we seek for ourselves, but they're really petty. We want, this or that. We want guidance with that problem that's afflicting us, or we want healing of a physical malady or disease. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with seeking those things, but the ultimate gift is Christ himself. It's a depth that can never be exhausted, truly the well of the living water. Poured forth from the Sacred Heart of Jesus, it is an endless spring that gives life. And so often, we settle for just a trickle. The life of the Spirit will have a God moment, and then we're excited and run off and go back to what we were doing before. Or we seek the fulfillment of one little prayer request, and then we're satisfied and we just carry on. But in fact, all of these things are meant to invite us deeper, to plunge into an inexhaustible depth of God, the only place where joy and life are truly found. We settle for dry cisterns all too often. We look for the cup of water here and there, but Christ is inviting us to be fully submerged into the living water, that we can drink deeply and never thirst again, to have life and life abundantly. And so, my brothers and sisters, as we've passed this halfway point of Lent with Laetare Sunday, may we now continue to go deeper, not settle, not just go into coast mode for the rest of Lent, but to open our hearts fully to what God is trying to reveal to us, that our life may not be just temporarily changed during Lent as we alter different practices, but that there might be a permanent change in us, another step towards going into that inexhaustible depth where we will find joy like we've never known it before. May God bless you all.